Joe. Make this bigger. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to give it a couple more minutes to see if other folks join, and then we'll begin shortly. And can I get a thumbs up if everyone can hear me? Or if you just, thanks, Amy. Oh, feel free to unmute yourself as well. You don't have to stay on mute.
Hello, Amy.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
Hanging in there. You know how it is.
Yep.
I'll start in about a minute. So. So just a little note, so I am looking straight at the camera now so you can see me, but when I start presenting, I'm actually going to look at a different screen. So it will look like I'm looking away from the camera. So just a heads up. I hope that's okay. But if there's a question, I'll just turn my way back into the camera. So I'll go ahead and get started. It looks like we do have quite a few folks on the line, and as folks are joining, we'll just let them in. So hopefully you're in the right session. This is the Kuali System Administrator training, and we're going to focus today on the sponsor programs configurations. We'll focus on as much as we can. We'll go over some of the basics, and then we'll look at some examples. A lot of you know how highly configurable our system is, so you probably already have the expectations. We can't cover everything in this short amount of time that we have, but we'll go through some basics to give you some of the background information you may need on how to maintain configurations. And then we'll look at some of the examples on how to configure, more specifically, some of the recent features that we have released over the last year or year and a half. So I'm Kat. I am the Director of Customer Success on the research team. I think I have worked with a number of you, so a lot of you may know me. For those of you who don't, I have been with Kuali for close to 5 years, working with the research product and helping institutions implement the research platform. Prior to joining Kuali, I worked at another consulting company, also helping with Kuali Research, Kuali Careers implementations and consulting. And then prior to that, I actually started in research administration at a hospital and then at a central office at Brown University. So I did start originally in research administration and then worked my way sort of up to work with systems and systems implementation. Couple of the housekeeping items here I just want to quickly highlight. So these slides that I'm going to be going over today, I'll have some slides prepared, but I'll also do part of my presentation will also be as part of a live demo because I want to show you some of the configurations and how they're working. So it's going to be a combination of the slides as well as the live demo, but the slides will be uploaded to the platform, so you will have access to the slides, and the recording will also be uploaded to the platform. So either by the end of this week or early next week, the recording will be up there with the session. So if you want to rewatch it, you'll have the opportunity to do so as well. I will ask you or encourage you to rate the session at the end of the session. So in the Socio platform, there is a rate now button in the right-hand corner. So at the end, if you don't mind, just rating the session. We do want to gauge feedback to see if sessions as these, if they're helpful to you, or if it's something that we need to change direction in, for example, for next Kuali days. And then feel free to ask questions as I'm going along. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question, or also if you prefer, feel free to put the question in the chat. I have Bess, Omar on the line as well, and they'll monitor the chat. And if there's something that they're not able to answer, they'll just interrupt and pose the question so that I can take a stab at answering that question. Or in the cases, if none of us cannot answer the question, then we'll just, we'll get back to you. We'll do some research and get back to you. So for today's agenda, what I want to cover is, again, I just want to focus a little bit on just sort of the basics. I want to give you just sort of the background information that sort of is necessary for some of the other things we'll be looking at today. So I'll go over some of the high level definitions around what is a maintenance document, what is a parameter. You'll hear me refer to these things throughout the presentation. So again, I just want you to have the background information. I also want to highlight how you can access some of the configuration resources that we have. And then we'll dive into looking at specific configuration examples, because I think really that demonstrates how you would go about configuring some of the functionality in the sponsor programs side. So we'll look at some of the parameters. We'll look at how to some of the configurations options around the dashboard, the new dashboard that we have available. We'll look at also on how to set up what's called limited award editability, and then also focus a little bit about a newer budgeting feature that came out. This is separate from the new budget tool that's being worked on. I still will focus on the current budget tool, but there is a new feature that we've released that helps with budgeting for academic and summer appointment types. So I'll walk through how to set that up. I do want to quickly highlight also sponsor hierarchy. It's not a new feature. It's been in the system for quite some time, but it is sort of a topic that has come up in the recent months, some of the functionality around sponsor hierarchy. So I do want to cover that a little bit and how that would get configured. And then time permitting, we'll look at on formatting questions. So I don't know if a lot of you know, or if any of you know that you have the capability to change the appearance of how the questions show up in proposal development. So we'll look a little bit on how you would go about changing the format of the questions and how that process would look like. So the very first thing I want to highlight or go over is, again, just the basics. What is a maintenance document? So a maintenance document is really a reference table that defines attributes the system uses, whether it's to maintain a dropdown, whether it's to maintain a lookup. All of those things are considered maintenance document. As you may know, we have hundreds of maintenance documents in Kuali Research. And this sort of breadth of the maintenance documents, how many there are, is really the reason why our Kuali Research platform is so highly configurable. Many of our customers want to see their own drop-down values. They want the application to behave to align with their business processes. And this sort of flexibility around how configurable the platform is sort of driven by, the ability and the number of maintenance tables that we have available in the system. All of the maintenance documents, for the most part, are configurable by each institution. There are some maintenance documents where, if you have gone through the implementation sort of activities with us, we'll tell you, it's not recommended that you change this maintenance table because it drives system to system capabilities or is tied to another functionality that Kuali maintains and you should not maintain on your own. But I would say probably 95% of the maintenance tables that are in the system are something that you as an institution get to decide and set up based on your specific needs to meet your specific business processes. All of the maintenance tables are located in the all links area. So I do have a quick screenshot here of the dashboard and the left-hand navigation. So all of the maintenance documents are going to be located in this all links area. And I do want to just quickly highlight that all of the users, so if a user has access to log into the system, they'll have the ability to view all of the maintenance tables and sort of see what the values are in those maintenance tables. However, they don't have access to edit any of that information. And the edit capability, as well as the initiation of new maintenance documents, is often reserved to just those users who are defined as system administrators or system managers. But again, I did want to highlight that all users have access to all links and they can view the information in the all links area. The maintenance tables, these maintenance documents, for the most part, are organized into the specific menu groups. And the menu group often will be associated with the particular module that it impacts. So I have a table here highlighting some of the highlighting the menu groups that we do have available. And then just a quick screenshot to sort of tie and provide the visual of what I mean by menu groups. So under the all links area, there is a number of panels available there. And each one of those panels represents a menu group. And again, those will be categorized for the most part by the module that the maintenance tables are impacting. So I'll start sort of from the middle here. We have a proposals menu group, and any maintenance table that you see in a proposals group means that it impacts that specific proposal development module or an institutional proposal module. We also have awards groups, we have negotiations groups and subawards. So the same functionality or the same sort of methodology applies, that any maintenance table in any one of these maintenance groups is going to be applicable to that specific module. So if you need to update a configuration for a negotiation and you're not quite sure what the maintenance table is called, as the first sort of thing I would encourage you to do is, go to that menu group, expand that menu group and see what are the different maintenance tables available in that particular group. And that's going to give you an idea of some of the things that you can maintain. But we do also have maintenance tables that are shared and maintenance tables that are not easily categorized into menu groups. So that is why you see some of these other options, such as the shared across modules, miscellaneous, and system admin. So if the table is shared across the different modules, and most sort of common example is, for example, proposal type. Proposal type is used in proposal development, it's used in IP. That will be found for the most part in the shared across module. Another one is an activity type. So for those of you who use the sponsor program suite, you know that there is an activity type dropdown that shows up in proposal, it shows up in institutional proposal, it also shows up in award. And that is a dropdown again. So that activity type maintenance table that controls what shows up in that dropdown is in the shared category. Again, because we just want to provide some guidance around, giving you idea that if you change something in a particular menu group maintenance table, it may have impact to more than one module in the system. We'll also have a miscellaneous category, and again, you might see options in there where we couldn't easily categorize those options into a particular module. So you'll see some things there. And we also have a system admin category. And this is where you'll see links to parameters, to roles, to persons, to people flow terms. So things that impact, again, it's across the different modules, but it also impacts other functionality, such as, again, parameters, roles, and so forth. So again, just wanted to share that background information so that you can know where you can find some of those configuration options. So you've heard me reference to parameters and mention parameters throughout the sort of the initial part of our presentation. In addition to maintenance documents, which for the most part are going to control dropdowns, they're going to control lookups, we also have what's called parameters. And parameters are also sometimes referred to as feature flags. And what a parameter does, it controls or it determines how a particular part of an application behaves. A parameter could be as simple as, enabling a particular panel to display in a module, or it can be more complex as allowing certain proposal types to be versioned when an IP gets created. So again, the parameters will often control sort of how the application behaves. And it's just another layer of configuration that is added into the system to allow institutions to configure the system to best meet their business processes. We have hundreds of parameters in the system. And today I'll highlight some of the newer that have been sort of released in the last year or year and a half. And again, I'll just highlight some of them and just to show you some of the functionality that is often controlled by a parameter in the system. And just a little bit more on parameters. And then again, I'll show you some examples, but just to give you some of the basics again. If you are looking or when you are looking on a parameter, similar to what we saw with the maintenance tables, maintenance tables have been organized into different menu groups. And again, most often those menu groups will correlate with the module that maintenance document is impacting. We see similar behavior with parameters, but in parameters, we're going to see a namespace, and that's how a parameter is categorized. It has a namespace assigned. And for the most part, the namespace is going to, again, correlate with the module that parameter is impacting. So here's an example screenshot where I have an award, a namespace parameter. So I know that this parameter will have an impact on something that is happening in the award module. And again, you can have proposal development namespaces, IP namespaces, negotiation namespaces. So again, for the most part, that will tell you that parameter is specific to that module. But similar to what we saw with maintenance documents, where you have shared maintenance documents, you'll see similar things happening on the parameter side. So there may be other namespaces that are more global and apply to again, more than one module in the system. So again, I will go through an example parameter and highlight how they are set up and how you have the ability to modify them if needed. And again, these are just different types of parameters. It's not something you would be changing, but did want to give you a little bit of definition of the type of parameters you might want to see. Most of our parameters are set up as configuration parameters, meaning they drive configuration behavior. We have also parameters that drive help. So throughout the application, for those of you, again, familiar with our sponsored program suites, on the proposal development side, you see there is a help option in the toolbar that allows users to click on any of the help links that are available there. And where those links take the user is driven by these help parameters. So if an institution ever has a need to point the user to a different help documentation, it's as simple as finding the associated help parameter and updating that URL. And same thing applies on the award. On the award side, you'll see there are question marks next to sections, next to fields. And again, those question marks have an associated help parameter that allow you to update the URL. So if you have your own help documentation that you've created and posted on your website, again, those help parameters, URLs could be updated to point users to that help documentation. So I do want to highlight, before I go into and start looking at some of the examples, I do want to highlight our resources. So we do have a knowledge base page, and I do have a link here. So if you go into a Kuali Research support portal, all of our documentation is going to live under the knowledge base, and it's categorized into, again, the different modules or functional areas. But then we do have a number of system admin documentation resources available. So again, if you just scroll down and find the category of what you're looking for, we have configuration functionality that impacts multiple modules. We have the maintenance configuration area. So if you need to maintain some of the maintenance documents, you'll find resources there. Same thing with system administration resources, the parameters. So as I've mentioned, again, we have hundreds of parameters. So as new parameters are being released, we create, and I don't mean we, and more Jessica's team creates a document and posts on this for each parameter so that you know what a parameter is doing. So we do have a number of resources available here. So I would encourage you to use this sort of as the first step in trying to update a configuration. And then, of course, if you don't find a resource for something you're trying to do, feel free to submit a support ticket, and one of us is going to be able to assist you with making configuration update. Go back into our slides. So I do want to pause here for a little bit. And before I look at the configuration examples, I want to see if there are any questions so far. Anything in the chat so far, Bess or Omar? Nope.
No.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and look at some of the configuration examples. So I'm going to start with some of the newish parameters, and I want to spotlight some of them that have, again, been released in the last, I would say, year or a year and a half. So here is a list of all of these, and I'm not going to go through each one of them. Maybe I will, depending on how we go with time. I might circle back to some of these. But I do want to highlight some of these because you may have not been aware that these parameters have been released, though we do send announcements. But again, I just want to let you know that those are available in case you wanted to revisit some of your current configurations and maybe take advantage of some of this new functionality that these parameters provide. So the very first three that I have here is have to do with being able to hide or make visible certain pieces of a module, and we're looking specifically at institutional proposal and the award, and then this one is also in the award. So once these slides are posted, all of these are linking to the associated configuration resource, but I will also take a look in the application to show you how changing some of these parameters impacts what's seen in the application. So we have the parameter to enable central admin contacts, and that's in the award and in the IP. So I am going to pull this up real quick. So I'm going to go into one of our internal environments and it log me out. So let me log in. So these two parameters were put in place because we've been hearing feedback from customers that they want the ability to hide certain pieces of the application that they're not using. So most common one is the central admin tab panel that's available in contacts tab in the award and institutional proposal module. So I'm going to open up just an example award record here just to show you which area of the application I am referencing. So if I go to the contacts tab in the award record, and the same contacts tabs exist in the institutional proposal, there's the central admin contacts panel, which again, a lot of our customers are not using. So we wanted to provide the ability for customers to hide that section if it's not being used. So again, there is a parameter that controls the display of this panel. So I'm going to go ahead and open up and go into all links. And to access all of the parameters, I'm going to type in parameter and the search for a link toolbar that's available here. I'm going to select that. If you just do a blanket search for all of the parameters, the system is going to display all of the parameters that are available in the system. And again, it's in the hundreds. We have 853 parameters currently in the system. So that's a lot. For the most part, the parameter name is going to somehow correlate to the functionality and controls. So if you know maybe a keyword of what you're looking for, you could do the stars as the wildcard and then type in the keyword or the phrase that you hope is included in the parameters. So I think I'm going to put central because that's the central admin contacts panel. So I'm just taking an assumption that that parameter includes central in its name. And in fact, it does. And I get to see that there is enable central admin contacts award parameter and enable central contacts IP parameter. So again, if you decide that you want to hide those panels in your instance of Kuali Research, is as simple as going and updating this parameter. So I'm going to update the award one. I'm going to provide a description. And then I'm going to provide the appropriate parameter value. So as a rule of thumb, if you see that a parameter has either yes, or a y, or n in the parameter value field, that means that a y or an n are acceptable values to be entered. For example, if you see that a parameter is referencing true or false as the value, that means that those are the acceptable values to enter in a parameter. And then you'll also see some parameters actually reference code values. So those will be numerical values. So you should see based on what's currently in a parameter, what acceptable values are for that particular parameter. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to n, and it's going to be an uppercase n, and I'm going to submit to finalize this. So now I've disabled this panel in the award module. So if I go back into an award record, I'm just going to refresh. I'm going to go back into that same award record that I was just in, and I'm going to go into the contacts. Now that central contacts panel is no longer there. It's hidden from view. So again, just wanted to provide a sort of a quick example of how one of those parameters impacts some of the system functionality. Let me go back into my slides and see some of the other ones that we have. We also have a parameter that I want to highlight, which enables direct institutional proposal creation. So I'm not sure how many folks on the line currently create institutional proposals outside of the proposal development process. But you do have the ability to create an institutional proposal without having a proposal development record. But the process used to be that you still had to create what's called a proposal log. So that has been now eliminated. And we've created this parameter, enable direct IP creation, that when it's set to yes, it allows you to create an institutional proposal record without having that proposal log as a precursor. So again, just wanted to highlight it as an option. Some of the other parameters that we have here, which have to do with this limited award editability capability, I'm going to focus on those as I'm configuring that sort of functionality that I've highlighted. So we'll revisit these. But I do want to show you some other parameters here that accept different values other than yes or no. Some of the newer parameters we've issued had to do with how address book behaves and giving you the ability to default some values into the address book. So many of you may know that in order to create, users have the ability to create address books, also known as Rolodexes, so that people outside of your institution can be named on the proposal or on the award. And when a user creates an address book, they're asked to enter a number of fields. And one of them is the unit. Owned by unit is a field in address book. So we've created this parameter on address book owned by units. I'm going to go ahead and look that parameter up. So here it is. And this parameter allows institutions to default a value. So for the most part, each institution, when an address book is created, they provide instruction to users that the unit for the address book should always be the top unit of your hierarchy, which is often those 5 zeros and a 1 at the end. So if that's always the case, we can set this parameter that so that when users create an address book, the unit field is always pre-populated with the value that we enter here. So for example, I'm going to enter the 5 zeros and the 1, which is the top level of my unit hierarchy, and I'm going to finalize this. So now if I go and create an address book, I see that the owned by unit field is defaulted with that value that I've indicated in that parameter. So we're just eliminating one field that users have to enter when creating an address book. And then you'll notice that there is another parameter where address book organization as sponsor name. So it also has to do with how address books are created. And this parameter, if it's enabled, it's going to default the address book name to be the same as the sponsor. So if a sponsor is selected on an address book, that sponsor name is going to default as the organization name. So again, we're just providing some tools to default some of the logic to help users create some of these records. So I'm not going to go through the rest of these, but again, all of these are linked to a document associated with this particular functionality. So if you are wondering what some of these do, again, these slides will be uploaded, so you'll be able to see that information and see what the parameters does. So the other thing I want to focus on now is some of the newer configuration options available in the dashboard. So I think what everyone is familiar with and what everyone is aware of is that the configuration or the dashboard configuration for the most part is driven by the configuration option that's available in the left-hand navigation panel. So that's how you are able to determine what cards show up in the dashboard area as well as in the common tasks area of your dashboard. This is a global setting, meaning that whatever you configure in this area for your dashboard is what all of the users are going to see. But there's a little sort of an asterisk next to that, and I'll go into that in a little bit. But as the first step, you do have to enable the cards that you want to make visible to your institution. So any user who has the needed role assigned will be able to maintain this configuration. And again, often this is something that a system administrator for an institution is able to do. If a user doesn't have the role, they're not going to see this configuration option. So again, this will be hidden from their view. So you did want to highlight that for the most part, the dashboard configuration, and again, by dashboard, I mean the dashboard cards that are seen in the dashboard right here, as well as the cards we're seeing in the common tasks and in the all links are driven by what's enabled in this configuration area. However, recently, we've also added additional permissions around the cards that are visible to users. So again, when we initially rolled out the dashboard, whatever cards you made available in the configuration area here were the cards that users saw in their dashboard. And of course, if a user didn't have, for example, access to see any of the negotiations, so even if the negotiation card was enabled, they would not see anything in the negotiation card, but the card would still display. But now we can take this a step further, and you can actually configure or be more specific with regards to what cards users see. So for example, if you don't give anyone access to the negotiation module, but just maybe your central office, you now have the ability to take that negotiations card view access away from those users and only give it to those users that have access to the negotiation module. So again, we've created these permissions. So here's a list of all of the permissions. Each permission corresponds to a specific card because again, we want to give you that flexibility to be able to configure that. So we have a permission that drives whether or not users can see the proposals routing to me card, whether users can see the proposals not routing card, institutional proposal cards, awards, negotiation, subawards, and the proposal workload assignments card, which is the last card at the bottom. So by default, these permissions are included in the derived user role. So in the system in Kuali, so I'm going to flip back again, and I apologize if I'm jumping too much. So in Kuali, if I go into the role lookup, that's well all of the roles that you are able to maintain and assign to users live. There is a role called user, and that's a derived role. It's not a role that you would proactively assign users to. It's just something that gets assigned to everyone behind the scenes. So any person who is loaded into Kuali and is an active person will have this derived role assigned. And this user role has a number of permissions, sort of standard, that come out of the box. And that is where all of those proposal route, those card permissions have been added. So by default, any user that logs in will have access to view all of the cards that you have enabled for your institution. So in those cases where you don't want everyone to see specific cards, you can remove these permissions from this user role. So you have the ability to edit the permissions associated with this derived user role. So you'll be able to inactivate them. And then associate those permissions with another role that you may have already set up in the system, or maybe create another role with just those permissions for those users that do need to see these cards. So again, giving you the flexibility to configure this sort of more to what you need as an institution and have more control over what dashboard cards are available to what user types. So I do want to pause and see if there are any questions so far.
Yeah, one question about the user roles for the negotiation. What is triggering the it to go on people's cards? Is it the initiator or is it the negotiator field?
So so as you suspect, each card has sort of its own logic for the most part. The negotiation card specifically, users will see records in the negotiations card if the user is assigned as the negotiator on that negotiation, or if the user is the PI on that negotiation. So that is what's currently driving whether or not a negotiation is going to show up on someone's negotiations card. The other cards, however, are sort of more broad, and in the other cards, users will see the record if they have access to either view or edit that record, and for the purposes of the routing card, if they're an approver on the record. So the negotiation card is the one that behaves slightly differently, where it is looking at if a user is a negotiator or a PI. And in those two cases, that's how the record will display in that card.
One more quick question, sorry. So because we only have 2 people and we're trying to eliminate like emails from our pre-award group to our post-award, so having them be considered negotiators in the post-award group will have those negotiations automatically go on their cards. If we change it for some reason, person's out, will that, if the pre-award group changes the negotiation sometime because a person's out or something like that, will that be reflective into the person that's been reassigned, or is it they have to create a new negotiation?
No, so if you go into that negotiation and you changed who the negotiator is, yeah, it will reassign and it will update appropriately, and it will then
I
show.
wanted to make sure because our peer work group is trying to get their heads around this.
Yep.
Alrighty, thank you.
Any other questions before I move on to some of the other examples? So the next thing I want to review is what we are calling limited award editability. And a lot of you may be like, what is this? If you attended yesterday's session on show and tell, the UCAR and UMBC and UAH session, UCAR introduced this a little bit yesterday. So I'm going to take this a step further and again, just talk a little bit about what this is all about and how you would go about configuring this if this is something that you want to take advantage of in the system. So limited award editability, what does it do? So it allows you to grant users access to edit certain pieces of the award record. And right now it's 4 areas of the award record that are included. So it allows you to grant access to edit the reports section of an award, the sponsor contacts section, the notes section, and the attachments section. So those are the 4 sections that have been sort of opened up as something as part of this limit award editability. And once this is enabled and users have been granted the appropriate roles and the parameters have been configured, the updates to these sections are made to the last finalized award version. So if a user has access to make this limited award edit capability, they're not actually versioning the award record, but they're making updates to the last finalized version of that award record. And again, I'll demo that a little bit just to put this a bit more into perspective of how this would function. So as part of this functionality, again, we wanted to make this as configurable as possible to meet sort of the broadest sort of use case and make it configurable per each institution. So there are sort of a few pieces of configuration that go into setting this up. One of the first things we did is we created a new derived role type. So for those of you familiar a bit more with configuration, you know that in the system we have many different role types. We have unit role types, we have unit hierarchy, we also have derived roles, which sort of based on their name, they derived someone's access based on users being either named on that proposal or given access to that proposal or award. So on the award side, we've created, again, a new derived role called award unit contacts, and users can set up multiple roles with this type that are going to look at the unit contacts area of an award. And then once those roles are set up, multiple permissions can be associated with these roles. So then again, users would inherit those permissions if someone is named as a unit contact on an award record. So it allows you to, it eliminates the need to maintain permissions. You just set up the derived role, and by the virtue of that person being named as a unit contact, they would inherit whatever permissions are needed with that specific derived role. In addition to setting up that role, we've also set up or made available 4 parameters, actually 4 permissions, sorry. And these permissions tie specifically to the different pieces of the application that is made available as part of this limited award editability. So if you reference it, or if you see it here, we're allowing the report section to be edited. We're allowing the sponsor contact section to be edited, notes, and then the attachments. So each one of these sections, the edit capability, is actually associated with its own distinct permission. So it allows each institution to take advantage, of the distinct pieces. You don't have to do it all. You can do certain areas of the award based on what your needs are. So the 4 permissions that we have set up is, we've set up the limited award, modify award sponsor contacts. So if someone has that permission, they'll be able to maintain sponsor contacts. And then we have the permission that has to do with attachments. So again, if someone has that limited modify award attachments permission assigned, they'll be able to maintain the attachments. And then if someone has the limited modify award report classes, they'll be able to modify the report classes. And then the notes one, obviously they'll be able to modify the notes. So if someone has all 4, they'll be able to update all 4 areas of the award. But if they have 1 or 2, they'll only be able to update whatever areas of the award they have the permissions to do. But then we took this a step further. We also created associated parameters to, again, give you more control of what they can update in those specific areas that they have permissions to update. So along with the ability to, modify sponsor contacts, you also have to set up the following parameter: limited editability award sponsor contact types, where you are going to be indicating which sponsor contact types can these users maintain. Do you want them to have access to maintain all sponsor contact types, or maybe only a handful? So again, based on how that parameter is set up, users with those permission will only have access to maintain the contact types identified in this parameter. Similar concept with the attachments. So again, someone has to have the permission assigned to be able to maintain attachments. But again, we're then taking it a step further to allow you to tell the system what attachment types should that user have access to maintain. You probably don't want them to maintain the notice of award or any sort of attachment types that your central offices are maintaining. Then maybe you want them to upload reports, copies of reports. So in those cases, an attachment type can be created for reports, and those attachment types can be identified in this parameter. So a user with this limited, award modify attachments permission will only have access to maybe those attachment types and have access to upload those attachment types only. And then same thing with the report classes. We've heard that, different report classes are being managed by different folks. So we created similar logic. Someone has to have the report classes permission assigned in order to have access to modify them. But then again, we're taking it a step further where you identify which report classes should they have access to modify. Is it all? Or again, is it maybe just a technical report class that you want them to modify? So this parameter is going to allow you to identify which report classes this limited award editability capability should give them access to modify. And then with notes, there aren't note types or anything like that. So it's just a permission. There isn't a particular parameter associated with it. So I do want to show you an example that I've set up in my demo environment, just to give you a little bit of an idea of how this functions. So just a little bit of background on my example is I've set up a role. So you can build a role. You can either use the derived role concept, or you can create a unit or unit hierarchy role. And that role has all of these permissions assigned. And then I have assigned a user to this role. And then I've also updated these parameters with the appropriate values. So I'll quickly show you these parameters and how they're set up. and then the role, and then I'll log in as the user with that role, just so you get to see that sort of the entire picture of what this capability is giving these users the access to do. So let me go ahead and go into my demo environment again, and I'm going to go into the role. Sorry, I got logged out again.
And Kat, we have a question asking if this new functionality is available in 5.2.1.
No, so this is only in the current code, I believe. And we do have the engineers on the line, so I don't know if they can chime in and confirm that it's not available in 5.2.1. I think it's only on the current code. We just released
It's
it.
not available. Yeah, it's not available in 5.2.1, but since this is KNS, they should be able to, on-premise institutions should be able to take this code and use it if they want.
Oh, okay.
But it is not available in 5.2.1 right now. Yeah.
All right,
Great.
so
Thanks, Omar.
So I'm going to go into the not the person, I apologize. I'm going to go into the role maintenance table just to show you quickly the custom role that I've created. And I've called it custom so that I can quickly find it. So I have my custom role that I've created, limited award edit role here. And just to show you, this role right now has all the permissions that I've talked about, because again, I want to demo all of the functionality. And then it also has the permission to view the award, because again, I need to have access to view the award in order to then be able to make that limit edit access update. So I've created this role and I've assigned myself to this role, and that's the only role that I have assigned. So again, once I log in as myself, you'll see some of the things I can do in the award record. And then the other thing I want to quickly show you is these parameters. So here are the 3 parameters that I've talked about, and I have set these parameters up with the associated values. Attachment type code. So I've added 2 attachment types that this user is able to edit. So these will be like the report types. So again, I just looked at my values for attachment types in my system. So I set the associated values. Same thing with sponsor contacts. I can only edit 1 sponsor contact type. So you'll notice that when I go into the award, into the sponsor contacts area, there will just be 1 option in the type dropdown for me. And then report classes, I can edit 2 report classes. And again, you'll see that the other report classes that are there are not going to be editable by me once I log in as that user. So I'm going to log out and I'm going to log in as myself. And then I'll quickly open up an award record. Let me just get my number here. So again, I'm logged in as myself. That's the only role that I have assigned in this system. So let me just search for this award record 475. So here's that award record. I'm going to go ahead and open that award record. I have view access to the award record. As you can see, I do not have an edit button. So again, this limited award editability feature doesn't allow them to edit the award. We're making updates to the last finalized version of that award. So we're not creating a new version. We're not assigning a new transaction type. That's not happening in this case. But as I said, so none of these areas are available for me to update. So as you can see, all of these fields are locked down for edits. But one of the areas that I can update is that sponsor contacts area now. So if I go here, you'll see that I can add a sponsor contact. I cannot delete this contact because the type of role is not one of the types of roles that I can manage. So I can come here, select a sponsor contact that I want to add. And then there's only 1 role that I can maintain, and that's driven by that parameter. So I can only assign this role type. Similarly, if I go to the payment reports and terms area, this is with the reports. There are 3 report classes enabled, and I'm just going to expand. And as you can see, I cannot manage the financial report class because again, in the parameter, I didn't specify that that is a report class that I can manage. But I can manage the other 2, the intellectual property and the technical management. So I can update reports, I can add reports, I can track, update the report tracking details. So again, this gives you the capability, if you wanted to introduce the award report tracking to your campus or to your institution, this gives you more flexibility to set it up and have the departments or PIs manage this information on their awards without having full edit capabilities to the entire award record. And then the notes and attachments area is the other area where we're able to maintain and allowed to edit as part of this limited award editability. So again, as you can see, I do have the ability to edit, add an attachment here. From the attachment type dropdown, I only see the two options that I've identified in that parameter. So these are the only two options that I can add. As you can see, there's someone who's added here a sponsored document, and it's not one of the options that I can maintain. And I can't even modify this one because I don't have access to modify an existing attachment here. But I can add a report here and upload a copy of that report, which I'm not going to do. But again, you'll be able to do that here. And then same thing with notes. If a user has the permission to maintain notes, they'll be able to go ahead and add a note into the award record. Okay. So any questions on this limited award edit capability that we have available? I think all of the parameters have been documented. I think we're still working on a more general documentation to put sort of this as an entire package.
So Kat, do you see this as being more in the department rather than central office? It's more of a to enable other parts of the organization.
Yeah, and that's sort of where the need came out of. We have some institutions that are highly decentralized, and they want the ability. They want to distribute sort of the ability to manage an award among the departments and PIs, and then obviously the central office staff. So that's sort of where that sort of came out of is those discussions. Mostly it comes out of when we're talking about managing reports, technical reports, central office often doesn't have visibility of if they're submitted, when they're submitted. So distributing that capability of having other folks be able to edit certain pieces of the award allows you to better track that information and track it in a single place so that, PIs have one place to go to see what are all of the reports associated with their award record, and they can track it in a single place.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so the next thing I want to quickly show you is this academic summer appointment type automation and proposal budget. So what does this mean? So I did provide a link to the document, greatly explaining this functionality in detail. But again, I just want to show you this a bit more in practice and how it works and how you would go about configuring this if you wanted to enable that in your environment. So we have added a way to automatically add multiple budget lines for a person if that person has that academic summer split. So again, for those of you familiar with, the current budgeting or sort of the budgeting prior to this enhancement, if your budget period did not sort of start at, depending on what your budget period is, oftentimes you'd have to budget for someone who has an academic appointment. If they're working during the academic year and if they're working during the summer, that may mean that you have to potentially include that person 3 times in the budget for the various budget periods in a particular budget year. And this feature is now automating adding those budget line items for the person. So we have updated the appointment type maintenance table. So going back to the initial conversations we had with regards to maintenance table. So there is a maintenance table in the system called appointment type, where you identify what appointment types are applicable to your institution. So 9 months, 3 months, 10 months, 12 months, whatever the appointment types are. But there were 3 additions made to that maintenance table. And what we've added is we've added start date, end date, and a budget period type to that maintenance document. So based on how you update that info. So here's an example of how I made the updates in my particular environment. So I have defined my summer period. So this is where you would define your summer dates. So my summer period would be 6/1 through 8/31. And again, this would be updated based on when your summer happens. And then my academic period, I have it defined as running from 9/1 through 5/31. So once you have set up your academic type maintenance document, maintenance table, when you go and budget for folks that have an academic or a summer appointment type, there is now a new option that will become available. So really the only configuration option is, or update is, to set up the date. So you have to define the dates here. Once the dates are defined here, if you go into a budget, so I'm going to open up a budget example that I have here. Let me make sure. Oops, sorry. Sorry, I've lost my proposal type, but that's okay. Oh, I'm logged in as the wrong user.
Actually, Kat, while you're navigating, I'm just going to take a minute. I think that Dennis is on the meeting right now, and we have a question from Amanda asking if this functionality is going to be available in the new budget tool. So I just wanted to sneak in asking that question while you are navigating.
I don't know. So if Dennis, I'm not sure if you've had that opportunity to get familiar with this feature yet. I would assume for functional sort of equivalency, maybe this is now handled differently in the new budget. Maybe it's already easier to budget for someone through, for multiple budget lines. So maybe that's already taken care of and it's
Yeah, sorry,
easier.
I was just away from my desk for a second there.
Oh, sorry about that.
I heard my name, because I was getting ready to go to the R&D lab. So yeah, we're not in a position to answer that question yet. With the budget tool, we're still like a little too early in the process. But if you wanted to, as I mentioned, I'm going to be in the R&D lab in about 5 minutes. If you want to stop by there and we could talk about it more, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you.
All right, terrific.
All right.
Thank you.
So quickly, just to highlight here. So I have my budget person listed here. I have Allison. She has a 9-month appointment and I have her base salary set up here. So because she has a 9-month appointment, when I go and budget for her now, and I select Allison, there is now a new checkbox that becomes available because of that configuration update that I made into that maintenance table. So if this is checked, I get to indicate, I'm just going to do, 10% effort. Object code, I'll just say research staff. And now the system adds the 3 lines for me and it splits out the summer correctly and it splits out the academic year correctly for me. And then I can go and update each one of these if they need to be updated. But again, I did want to highlight this real quick and show you quickly how you would go about adding that configuration into your environment if that is a feature that you want to take advantage of. I do want to quickly just highlight some of the other things and go over sponsor hierarchy real quick. A lot of you may be taking advantage of sponsor hierarchy already or maybe not. But I did want to let you know that that is something that's available. And again, I've highlighted the document. So sponsor hierarchy allows you to maintain sort of a hierarchical structure or grouping of all of your sponsors. So for those of you, again, working in Kuali, you know that when you select sponsors, we're working at that sort of lowest level of the sponsor. So you select NIH, you can select NSF, whatever the sponsor categories are. However, in the system, you're able to set up these sponsor groupings. So, for example, for PHS agencies, you may want to track your award activities at that lowest agency level. So maybe set up all of the NIH institutes and centers. And when you set up awards or when you set up, proposals, they're associated with the center or the institute. But maybe then you also have a need to be able to report at that PHS level or report it at the higher level that the sponsors sort of roll up to. So sponsor hierarchy allows you to do that. It allows you to create these groupings. And then again, your users interact with sponsors the same that they've always been, but behind the scenes, you have these groupings created and these groupings sort of help you with reporting, which is some of the most common reasons we see users taking advantage of sponsor hierarchy. But we also have some functionality tied around key person roles. So again, I've highlighted a document here to highlight that, and then also with COI disclosure requirements. So for those of you taking advantage of our conflict of interest, conflict of commitment module, there is logic built into the system to take account or take into consideration sponsor hierarchies to drive whether or not a user needs to disclose on a proposal or an award to a specific sponsor or specific sponsor groups. So again, did want to highlight that real quick. And I apologize, but I'm not going to have time to take a look at the questions formatting, but I do have the slides, and I think the slides sort of provide the information that I did try to convey. And basically, and some of you may be aware of this already, and some of you may not, but I did want to let you know that you can use HTML in your questions. So here's an example for those of you who are familiar with setting certification questions or general questions that are used in the proposal. Oftentimes you just enter the question text, but the question box is going to support HTML. So if you're familiar with HTML, or I use a tool, there is a tool online that I use. It's just I type it in as Word and it converts it to HTML for me. And then I just copy that and paste that HTML into the question box here. So again, you can take advantage of free tools like that online. But this gives you the ability to actually have a little bit more control of how the questionnaires show to users. So if you do care and you do want to format your questions to maybe take advantage of some of the color coding or do some, instructions. And again, this is just some flavors of the different formatting I've done for some customers. I did want to let you know that is something that the question maintenance document does support. I did want to point out that if in the questionnaire you do use the print option to print your questions, the HTML code does display. So again, if you do print, you might want to reassess whether or not HTML is something you want to use. But if no one takes advantage of that print option here, I do think that the HTML just provides a bit more sort of visual, better visual capabilities to be able to format these questions. So I am out of time, but I did want to see if there are any questions, anything that you were wondering about that maybe I didn't cover.
I have one question, and I while you're doing this, I was trying to test it. I'm not seeing the negotiations, even if they put me as a negotiator. And I think I know why the problem is. It's because the status is ready to set up rather than in progress. So if you put it in progress, it will appear on your cards in the front. But if you switch it to complete or anything else, it will obviously not appear at all. Is there something that we need to go into to change it so it will look at every status?
It is.
Yes.
It is hard coded to be in progress.
Oh, it is. I thought we were looking at the parameter. Okay.
I actually remember I asked that question of Jeff because I was actually hoping it would be looking at the parameter, and he did confirm that it's not.
Okay.
It's certainly, it's an enhancement we could look at making, like anything to, weigh against other priorities, but it is just looking at in progress and not at the parameter.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
You're absolutely right, Kevin. Good catch.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out why. And when we first got the dashboard this year, there was a few that negotiations that were really, really old that appeared on these cards, and I couldn't figure out why. And now I figured out that it is based on that one status.
We had a question too from Mark Melton asking, this is back to budgeting for summer and academic, that if you, so I'll just read it. What if you budget your summer months in a different object code than the 9-month appointment due to different fringe rates? Can you still split between 2 object codes?
So it's not going to split automatically into 2 object codes, but I've always, let me open this up real quick. You can still use it and then just delete the lines you don't want. So for example, let me go into my budget here.
Hey, Kat, that's okay. I was just testing it. I mean, we've made a change in the system, and I was just wondering if maybe it's something we're bringing over from 5.2.1 as we upgrade. And so I was trying to figure out whether we actually did bring it over or not. So we have to. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, sure.
Great. And then we also had a question from Susan from Arizona asking if the kind of formatting you just showed in question would also be coming over to the custom attributes.
I don't think so. I'm not aware of that. Yeah.
Great. And that was the end of the questions in chat. I don't know if anyone else has a question that wasn't put in there.
Well, thank you all for sticking around. I know we're 4 after the hour. I did want to put a plug for my session tomorrow, which I'm going to focus on crumbs and agenda. So validations, people flows. Again, we only have an hour, so I'll try to cover as much as I can. But if you're interested in learning a little bit more about, how to build a validation, how to set up routing, I would encourage you to attend. It's tomorrow at noon Eastern time. All right, awesome. Thank you all for attending.